traditional gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. So, a little bit about myself. My name is Irfan Chaudhry, and I'm the Director of MacEwan's Office of Human Rights, Diversity and Equity. And so, like I said, at MacEwan, we're really trying to build a culture of inclusion here. We welcome everyone, respect human rights, celebrate diversity, and embrace equity and inclusion. We build human rights champions who influence our community both within and beyond the university's walls. And so some of the projects we have on the go, just for your information, is the Equity Project. And so this is a project that we have on the go that we encourage students, faculty, staff at MacEwan to pitch us an idea. If you notice that there's something at MacEwan that isn't fitting your needs from an inclusion perspective, let us know and we'll do our best to try to work with you to build something like that. The other piece is the Human Rights Code Student Training Initiative. So we're going to be rolling this out in January, where we're going to be looking for students to apply and to just, over a 10-week period, learn different forms of human rights allyship, learn how to be a better human in general, and just trying to encourage students to be the champions of inclusion that we want to see here at MacEwan. The other piece is our office also wants to engage the community in critical conversations about hate and discrimination. So this is one of the main reasons why we organized the series, Understanding Hate. The purpose of these events is to empower students, faculty, staff, and the community at large to engage in education, conversation, and action around issues of discrimination. So our very first installment welcomes Brad Galloway to campus to speak about pathways in and out of the far-right movement in Canada. By looking at why people hate and how it impacts our social world, we can develop a deeper understanding of how to counter hate. So I'm going to introduce Brad in a couple of moments here, but I just wanted to give a few pieces of information for the crowd in attendance today. So we are going to be welcoming questions after Brad's presentation, and the way we're going to be doing that, just because it's quite a sizable crowd, if you have a question throughout the presentation, put your hand up, and one of our volunteers will come to you and provide you with a pen and a paper. Write your question down on that piece of paper and then give it back to that volunteer. So if I could just have the volunteers quickly raise their hands so we know where you are. Undergraduate student from the Student Criminology and Criminal Justice at the University of Fraser Valley. Brad currently works with the Organization for Prevention of Violence, OPV, as a research and intervention specialist, and is the regional coordinator for the Pacific Network's Northwest District for the Network Against Violent Extremism. Brad has worked as a research assistant for many Canadian universities as an affiliate with the Canadian Network for Research on Terrorism, Security, and Society. He also continues to research key topics on violent extremism movements in Canada and abroad. Brad holds a unique perspective as he spent 13 years in the far-right movement in Canada and now looks to educate communities and help others leave violent movements. So please join me in welcoming Brad to the stage.
Thank you, Irfan, and thank you to the university for inviting me here today to speak with this crowd. It's nice to see that there's students, and it looks like there's academics and different people in here. I'm happy to share my story here with you guys today. One thing I do ask is that nobody record or take photographs during the discussion today. So, as Irfan was saying, I work with the OPV, which is here in Alberta. I'm also the regional coordinator for the Against Violent Extremism Network for the region. And I've been working with Life After Hate for about 3 years, where we help other people lead violent extremist movements. I'm also a fourth year criminology student, which I'll get into describing what that means to me later. But most importantly, I think people are here to hear the story of the time that I spent within the far-right movement here in Canada. So this is a brief overview of what the conversation is going to look like tonight. So the early years of my life throughout the racist skinhead movement, disengagement, road to recovery, and then what's happening now. So like most Canadian kids, I had a great childhood. Played hockey, sports, went to school. However, around the age of 12, I started to become involved with some, guess, some other kids that have access to, I guess, some troubling things. We started getting into mischief, started small crime, petty crime stuff, and which caused trouble at school. Started skipping school, doing drugs. But most importantly, this is when I first realized that in my community it was predominantly Jewish school, and I began to wonder what this was all about. So like I said, I got into substance abuse, theft, assault. My first police contact was around 13 years old, I think. And basically, at this time, I was searching for some sort of identity, as most of us are. And I just identified with these, I guess, more criminal type of guys. I wanted to like get in with the tough guy crew because the other crowds just wasn't able to get in with them. So what was leading me to this was the freedom from disciplinary figures. I was an only child, so basically it looked like I had all this time and space to do whatever I wanted. And it led to my first time in youth custody, which under the Young Offenders Act created this revolving door for me. And all it left me when I got out of there was, left me seeking brotherhood somewhere. So I was seeking, there was a couple of gangs that I knew around in my neighborhood. There was a couple of other different groups that I knew. Maybe I could hang out with them and see if I could fit in with them. So with this though came endless troubles. I figured like criminality was the only option. I had some really diminishing relationships with my family, and negativity was like just surrounding me from all different areas. So the doors continued to close. I guess when I was 16, 17, I ended up going to this place here. Spent a bunch of time there for different criminal stuff that I was doing, and I just couldn't find my way out of this black hole that I was going down there. And so during this is a fairly depressing story, so I like to try to turn it around and talk about some positives that were happening at this time. So basically, there was this one police officer who, I went to jail lots, but this guy seemed to be able to keep us out of jail, me and some of my buddies. He seemed to be around every corner. And the biggest thing I took away from how he was treating us was he was treating us like humans and not just trying to arrest us for petty stuff that we were getting nailed for by some of the other police officers that were around in that area. And then I had a Children's Aid Society court-appointed guy, and he was just a fantastic person. He spent time with me outside of his normal time when he would work. He would take phone calls at any time. He was just a fantastic person, and I think today he's running for some sort of government in Ontario, so it looks like his career is over. So things were looking up at this time when I was around 18, and I was getting back to school. These guys were helping me get back to the station, right? So I met my old buddy at a pub that I was doing some crime with early on, doing part breaking into places and doing that kind of thing. He said he was a member of this Toronto skinhead group, which I thought was really cool at the time. And he started bringing me around all these different people who were introducing me to skinhead culture, skinhead music. And I was just really attracted to this kind of a young guy to the message of violence and the brotherhood that I was encountering in the group. So like I said, it's the power of the music, the literature, the promise of this identity and belonging, and the sense of overall brotherhood that I was able to gather from these groups. There was concerts. I started selling white power merchandise and started working along with some of the skinhead organizations that were there. This is what a typical concert would have looked like at that time. The guy up in there is Wolfgang Drogi, so he was with the Heritage Front. He's dead now, so he was one of the leaders of the movement around that time. And these are some of the bands. As you can see, there's a Blood and Honor logo in the back. This is back in the 90s, so these types of groups are still around now. So this is something I'll get into talking about a little more later. So along with this movement came more trouble with the law. Street fights with minorities and anti-racists at this time were very popular, and and these types of experiences would lead to more respect from the older members within these groups. So that's what I was trying to achieve, was membership into one of these groups somehow, and you had to get out there and do some of the violence to gain the respect. So this book here, the Turner Diaries, I'm not going to get into it too much because you can find it, I think, on Amazon still, which is whichever way you want to look at it, it's either unfortunate or fortunate. But the ideology and culture, this is a very important book to read. It's basically about taking over the government and things like that. So I was introduced to it, and I read it a few times, and one thing to take away from this is that this book was used, I think it was in two separate terrorist sort of related groups and organizations. So this stuff isn't just literature, it's these things actually exist too as sort of Bibles for this far-right extremist movement. So what the groups looked like that I was in, it was sort of like the biker gang culture. We had criminal gang structure, crimes equaled more respect of the old members. These are some of the religions that people claimed to practice while I was in there, which is Christian identity movement, creativity movement. There was tons of atheists, and today there's more of pagans involved in this movement than I've seen in the past. So this is a quote for the masses by David Lane, who was a founder of the Order, which was a white supremacist terrorist organization in the United States throughout the 80s. So I'm not going to read it out. Everyone, I think, can read it there, but it's the 14 words, which I'll get into here. So who uses this term? Hate groups, alt-right groups, militia groups. It's bridged into mainstream politics. We've heard this in Ontario. There's a candidate right now who's running for, I think it's mayor, and she was using this 14 words in a video. I guess things like this are emboldened by the political climate in some way or another. This sort of raises discussion of whether or not who should be using these types of comments, but where it originates from, is, in my opinion, is the most important thing to take away here. So, some things that I noticed that were things to really hone in on, looking back at my time in the movement, was the amount of hate crimes that we saw, and the death of members, which were often celebrated by these groups and sort of emboldened the groups. When one of their guys got killed, they would use this as some sort of martyrdom about how they were killed. So from that, this is sort of my shift from Toronto into Vancouver. This online thing became super popular, where we were planning meetings and concerts and all these different things online rather than offline, because we were being picked up by the British Columbia Hate Crimes Unit. We decided that we needed to move some of our talking and things to the online dynamic, because we figured that we were a little more anonymous. So the recruitment, this is sort of what it looked like. Internet for connecting with others, meetings, events, concerts. White Power music. I don't know if anyone in here remembers Napster, but that was a huge area for sharing different things. Panzerfaust, Resistance, Maistrap, these are all gone now. However, they were huge distributions for centralizing the distribution for white supremacist literature and materials. So we used to get these free CDs, which is these Panzerfaust ones here, and we take them around to schools, high schools specifically, and try to recruit young kids into the movement. And yeah, music today still is a huge thing for the movement, as it goes with recruitment. So, organized hate group forums. I can mention these two, Stormfront and Blood and Honor, because I was a part of doing recruitment on these forums. Stormfront, I think, has been removed a couple of times, but I think it's still there. But it's definitely a recruitment tool for organized hate groups to go to recruit new members there. But it was online in this area where I had my first contact with Volksfront, which was the group that I ended up being part of, which is now gone away. And these platforms, YouTube is central right now, a central area for recruitment through music. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, these are all used by these groups. Gap Social Network. If anyone has some questions, I can answer those later about how that goes on those different platforms. Again, YouTube. I'm not going to share this video, but you can take any white supremacist band that you can find, Google on the internet, and plug it in there, and you're going to find hundreds and hundreds of videos of this music. And basically, you'll see some are under group names, and then some will be like individuals who are posting this stuff. So key factors, what we can learn. I'm not telling people not to look at things or to take content away, or I know there's a big discussion that goes on about that, but I'm just talking about citizenship online and citizenship offline. If we want to be good people, we want to do the same good things that we're doing in the community as we're doing online, because of the prominence of online. And a lot of this I took away from an RCMP presentation that I watched on online citizenship. So, Focus on Canada, basically I can sum this up. I had to travel around everywhere so I could meet these people, and then eventually I became officially involved, and we got a chapter up here in Canada. It started in BC, then in Alberta, then it was in Quebec, and then after that it fell apart. I was the leader of that organization in Canada, which is positively one of the worst decisions I've made in my life. However, we live on. It's basically the premise for what we're doing here in Canada is we supported these would-be Aryan POWs even outside of prison. We were sending letters to the different prisoners, specifically terrorist organizations that were in prison in the United States for any kind of hate-related stuff. We're sending them money and books. We're collaborating with these women's groups as well to get them to help us out with the different prison outreach that we were trying to do. So this is me singing with one of these bands that I was talking about. This is in the late 2000s. Just another idea of how the music continues on. This was sort of one of the concerts that we had over time. But what this was creating was that different groups were creating different bands, and it became sort of a gang thing. Whoever had more, it turned into this gang sort of situation in the lower mainland of BC. So, egomania, this is basically what it looked like. There's so many alpha males trying to look for the top. Everyone wanted to be the leader. Members always wanted to take over, so this caused violence. And violence is the central theme to this. So this moves me into the exhaustion from the movement. If you can imagine violence for 13 years, continuous organizing, negativity. My introspection started to begin when I had a family. So I started to look at like, what am I doing with this? And basically, I started to think back, and I looked at this one situation and many other situations, but this is one that really resonated with me about one time we got in a fight with a Vietnamese gang in downtown Toronto, and I got beat up so badly I was laying on a table, and in walks this Orthodox Jewish-looking doctor, and I'm like dressed in a swastika shirt with boots, and I'm like, this guy shouldn't save my life. That's what I felt right at that moment. I couldn't get out of the group at that time, but when I look back on it now, it definitely was one of these things that helped me build compassion and understand what others were doing for me, even though I was involved in this awful movement. So at this time, after I started doing this introspection, there was dissent throughout our groups and the other groups. A couple of my friends were killed. Another couple of them had committed suicide. There was a lot of things going on at this time. I started trying to move my way out, and I started trying to like talk about non-criminal stuff, try to just create some bad persona for me. So try to find some ways out of this group. So at this time, they realized that the police realized we were in decline. So they were putting more pressure on us, which was causing things to break up and split up. International white power groups were starting to split up. There was a figurative gang war in the United States between the different factions of groups that I was involved in. And at that time, I figured I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna make a break for it now. I was losing my job. I wasn't able to travel anymore. And I looked to my family. My wife was super supportive of me leaving, obviously. Throughout all of this, she was keeping me skeptical of all of the different things that were going on. And most of all, I started thinking about, so I have these kids, how am I going to teach these things to my children? I can't teach my children to hate other kids based on the color of their skin, or what religion they are, or what identity they want to follow. Like this is just not something that I can do. So, rival groups and violence, the one main story that resonates with me on this one is I was sitting in a meeting as I was about to leave this movement with this other group of guys that was our rival group, and basically they were trying to shut down our chapters, whatever, jockeying for gang power in this area. And I look over my shoulder and there's my daughter at my door, banging on the door, going, just come in, like, what are you doing? Basically, all I could think in my head was, I can't be doing this. I need to be inside of it. So at this time, my wife gave me this ultimatum that you have to leave this movement or we're leaving you behind. And I chose to leave. These are some of the things that came to mind. Could I go back to criminality? I had no job, couldn't travel anywhere. Life basically sucked and I deserved it. So there's no simple plan, but there is a way out for anybody that is involved in this. Some of it, for some people, is building empathy. I know people that have been involved in a lot of violence. In the work that I do now, they said building empathy was a very, very important thing to them when they left these types of movements. It's long but worthwhile, and again, family, work, school, attaching yourself to positive things that equal positive benefit as opposed to the negative benefit. Applying for jobs, I started a criminology degree in 2014, and I'm still working on this. And that was my positive attachment model for me. That was my family and the school. If you can build one of these, if you're involved in these types of movements, this is definitely a plan. So leaving it all behind, I'm not going to leave it all behind. I believe that I can help others, whether it's through research or community engagement. I'm working with other former members of gangs and violent movements to try to build a network of educators that can bring this I have been there message, and to see if that will help people leave. So the future, what does it look like? I think interventions are possible for those who are really involved, and we can be there to help them. Mentoring people who want to leave these types of gangs or groups. Using my experience to help others. As we know in academia, multi-sectoral approaches focused on community and grassroots rather than focusing on this idea of law enforcement will change it all. I mean, police play a very significant role in this. However, I think it's the pre-primary prevention that's very important, that we can teach about it beforehand. And working with communities and not against them. So what can we all do? How to encounter hate? I guess that's the question that is asked a lot of times. So I'm not going to tell people how to do it, but I hear great ideas. I go to a lot of conferences. I hear that a lot of people around that are building fantastic ideas. But I think it's that we all play a role in this prevention to violent movements and violent gangs in our communities. So what's happening now? Irfan was saying that I was working with the OPP here in Alberta. We're just researching Canadian far-right groups and working with other former members of these types of groups to try to do some community engagement and prevent these types of groups from harming our communities. Also, with the Against Violent Extremism Network, we're looking at program development for those that are coming out of prison in the U.S. We haven't been able to roll out anything here in Canada yet, but we're looking at programs specific to how do we deal with people who have been charged with terrorist-related offenses when they're coming back to our communities. We need to be able to help them out. They're not going to be in prison forever, so what do we do? So we're looking at that. Connecting informers of all different types of violent movements and creating new research initiatives. Life After Hate is basically where I've done all my intervention work and assisting others lead these violent hate movements. So, resources, school staff, community policing, grassroots groups, online resources, family and friends. I can suggest any of these if people want to hit me up afterwards. I can suggest some different resources, but definitely there are some in your community, no matter where you're from. So this is some of my current research, academic research that I'm doing, which is probably minimal, but for an undergrad, I heard it's okay. So key points to take away: hate is exhausting. Gangs and violent movements obviously lead to bad outcomes. So this online, offline citizenship, maybe we start by building there and trying to create a better community around us. And a collaborative effort can equal overall change. So with that, I guess we'll welcome some questions, and thank you for inviting me out here to talk.
Everybody split?
Basically denounced Christianity.
I don't think when we split.
Thank you so much, Brad.
We want to go? I don't want to listen to questions. Let's split. Yeah, we're done.